Well, my husband saw an article in the Cape Gazette saying that a small congregation was starting in Rehoboth, and he immediately said, "We have to join." Join, I said, another congregation that we don't go to? And he said, yes. The presence of a synagogue in any community is important to support. And we spend enough time in Rehoboth that we should be members. And soon I discovered that my involvement was such that I was president of the congregation. This was not something that I had ever anticipated happening.
They put an ad in the paper. It was a gentleman who owned a restaurant here, Peter Weiss, and he had his daughter. He was here with his daughter, his wife, and he wanted to know if there was other Jews here in town.
We all sat around and met each other, and we were all surprised that there were that many Jews down here, and it was really nice.
He thought he'd do one night. He could sit 50 people in his restaurant. He ended up having to do 2 nights because he went to capacity like right away.
Very quickly, Len Kiki and Cheryl Fruckman and many others, the Frumans, and all got together and said, let's make this more formal, more organized.
The first meeting of Seaside was at the home of Harvey and Lynn Fruman. He was a guiding force in the establishment of Seaside.
After that, they formed a board, and maybe a few months into the board, Lynn asked me to be on the board.
During Cheryl's presidency was when myself, Joe Green, and Al Gross, the 3 of us sat together in my kitchen and wrote the bylaws.
I would just write a newsletter up, and then I started asking for Hebrew teachers, and we did a Bible study, history.
We wanted to make sure that we were non-denominational, egalitarian. We understood that you didn't need to be Jewish to be a part of Seaside Jewish Community, but you have to look at the Jewish traditions and things like that, and just embrace that as a part of things.
A home was important, to have a specific place to know you were going to go to. That's where the service is going to be. So the building was very important to making Seaside a real institution, a real synagogue.
I was sitting in my kitchen one day, and one of our tenants, I was telling him that Lynn was kind of looking around for a building, and he said, well, I know a perfect spot for you.
A group of elderly men who were the last members of the organization of Odd Fellows.
And the Odd Fellows, unfortunately, were getting to a point where there was only 4 left. Actually, there were 5 left.
They rented the building to us with the provision that once a week they could come into their room for their card games.
The Odd Fellows had one Jewish member, and he would tell the members of the Odd Fellows, Jim Holland, that he had no place to pray.
We rented it off of them for a while, and then they asked us if we wanted to buy it.
They really lost their ability to keep playing poker again, and they said, look, we don't, this was the words out of the guy's mouth, we do not want to sell this to a developer to put it more housing here. We want to sell it to you all to save this area as just a religious organization. And they offered us an extremely fair price.
Harvey Fruman and I chaired the mortgage payment committee. It seems a role I'm continually holding.
And we actually raised every single dime we needed to raise. Like, we had no mortgage, we had no money. It was phenomenal. The support of the community was great. So Beth comes to Seaside one day, Beth Cohen,
It was 2002.
and she sits down at Seaside, and she sits right in front of me.
We had just moved in to our place, and we were looking at the newspaper and noticed that there was a synagogue that was having High Holy Day services. Tickets weren't required. We could just show up. We thought, okay, this will be interesting. So we came on Rosh Hashanah morning.
She and Fran were sitting there, and Beth was calling it out.
And as I'm listening to her, I'm thinking to myself, man, she knows all the tunes, and she does it well. I mean, she really does it well.
I got up to go to the restroom, and in the hallway where the restroom was, this building is very different from what it was like then, Jeffrey Hotoff was in the hallway. He was kind of like the head usher. And when I came out of the bathroom, he said, "Can I ask you a question?" And I said, "Sure." And he said, "Would you lead services for us?" And I looked at him and I said, "How the heck do you even know that I have a skill like that?" I said, "I do, but how do you know that?" He said, "You're sitting behind the president of the congregation, and she's listening to you, and she's hearing you sing."
I said, there's a lady back there that really can do this good. She's been singing with the songs and doing the Hebrew. And
She let me know that we should corner you and ask you if you're willing to come and lead services for us.
And I jokingly said, I got to get you to lead services one day. Are you new to the area? They started laughing.
So I said to him, I said, "Well, thank you. That's a real honor." I said, "I would love to do it, but I would like to come and see one of the services first before I stand up and get involved."
Anybody that seemed like they knew what they were doing, we recruited them.
When I sat down, I must have had a Cheshire grin, and Fran looks at me and she says, "What happened? Why did it take you so long?" I said, "You won't believe this, but I've already been tapped to lead services at Seaside, and neither one of us could really contain our laughter, and we had to go like this because we didn't want to be heard."
Very quickly, we became friends, and I, at that time, got her to become our worship committee director.
And everything went from there. I became the halftime religious leader. They didn't care that I wasn't ordained as a rabbi. I was doing things just fine. I had always wanted to go to rabbinical school ever since I was a teenager. And timing and situations just never worked out. However, now I was kind of like a little bit free. I retired in 2007. So I started looking into rabbinical schools and found one that really worked for me, and went to rabbinical school for 6 years and became a rabbi. And in the time that I was here as the religious leader, I did all of my training, and I had a lab. I could take all of that I was learning and bring it to the congregation and see what worked and see what didn't work.
The neatest thing is just how most people feel when they come in, how welcoming it is, how quickly you're brought into the fold, and how quickly you kind of want to be a part of something different.
When I walk into a service, there's a little bit of a hominess, kind of sort of like Norman walking into Cheers. I sort of feel like connected.
People don't just come here and just come to services. Everybody wants to help. Everybody wants to be a part of it.
Big thing that was really important to Alyssa and I was when we first started coming to things around that 2004, 2005 time period, we just felt instantly acknowledged and included.
It was a community that formed without clergy leadership. So whatever they did, it was done by them. And I think that because it started that way, that kind of Hamish culture just stayed.
A few people I think we scared away with our love. People will come in, we grab you, we hug you. But for the most part, most people that we grabbed and we hugged have stayed around and been involved.
Some people did come in and say, "I want the synagogue to run like this, because that's what I come from." And the people who were here weren't willing to kind of let that happen. If you came in and you moved along with the congregation and listened to where they were, and you may have had a new idea to bring in, that was okay. Yet coming in immediately and saying, "Boy, this isn't like any other shul I've ever belonged to," that wasn't okay. And so I think that people ended up self-selecting both in and out.
Well, one of the ways I see my role, I described it when I was being interviewed, is, not being sort of at the top of a pyramid, but being like at the hub of a wheel. So people said, what does that mean? And I think by being in the center of a lot of the activities here at the synagogue, I begin to connect the spokes and to be able to connect this person and that person. When I hear this committee wants to do something and that committee wants to do something, think how could those synergize and make something even stronger, right? Could the learning be tied to the social action? Could the religious side be tied to the social side? Could the younger and older members come together? And those are the kinds of things I think that I'm going to do to start to shape a vision of making, Seaside really a magnet for people.
The growth is amazing. Our membership increase. This building is gorgeous, and we almost have the mortgage paid off, so it's very exciting.
I see the growth as a tribute to what Seaside has accomplished. I also see it as cautionary that we have to maintain a way of keeping the intimacy.
And to preserve the intimacy, I think that's something that I have to work on. I want to work on how we welcome people, like I was talking about. Every synagogue wants to be welcoming.
Even though we've gotten so much bigger, I want the newer people to have the same kind of feeling that I had when I walked in, which was, this is a place where people want me to be.
If you just come on the high holidays, you may feel, the friendliness, but you're not going to necessarily feel that intimacy if you only come when there's the largest events of the year. So having some smaller events, having different small groups, having one-on-ones, and just different opportunities for people to get to know one another, I think can help preserve some of that sense of intimacy.
Once upon a time, a guy who owned a food store decided he wanted company at a Seder. And remember what grew from that step into Jewish activity.
Seaside was the Bashert synagogue. Why did Beth show up for services? Why did the odd fellows want to sell us the building? Why did a Jewish fellow open a deli and want to have a Seder?
I hope that this 25th anniversary will be a time of celebrating all the hard work and the effort and everything that went into this, a Shehecheyanu moment of we've arrived at this time, fully celebrating it, and then seeing it as just the beginning of many new momentous possibilities as we continue to grow and go forward.